Welcome to the Classical Architecture Workshop. My name is Professor Brandon Rowe, and today we're going to be learning more about the Corinthian order. More specifically on how to draw the column base. As we have noted in the previous video, we'll be using the American Vignola, a guide to the making of classical architecture by William Ware, on how we put together this Corinthian base. A couple of things that you should note about the Corinthian base molding as we put this together is that it is very similar to Vignola's Ionic base. It has two beads between the Scotias, except that it also has a lower Taurus. When comparing the Ionic order, we essentially have two Taurus moldings that sandwich between one Scotia molds, separated by a couple of fillet molds. In the Corinthian column base, it's a little bit different because we've got two Taurus moldings, and in between those, we've got two other smaller Scotia moldings with a couple of fillet moldings as well as beads that we talked about just a minute ago. So that is kind of the main difference with the Corinthian. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. To begin today's lesson with drawing the Corinthian base, you're going to need a couple of items. First, you'll need an architectural scale. You'll need a mechanical pencil, possibly a pen for outlining afterwards, a triangle that has a 45 degree. You may also want, you could use your triangle for this, but if you've got a little small angle or a larger one, I'll be using those in this demonstration as well. Alright, so as we get started here, there's a couple of things that you should be aware of. The first is that our overall, the scale that we're going to be drawing this drawing to is D essentially equals 3 inches. Remember, D is the diameter of the column. So if I'm looking at my architectural scale, and I've got my 3-inch scale here, and I put it on my thickness, 3 inches is the same equivalent as 1 foot. So 3 inches, 6 inches, 9 inches, 12 inches. So that's how we're going to be drawing, getting this set up. So to begin with, for the base, you'll note that each of the sides of the plinths, each of the sides of half diameter is going to be 1.5 inches. We have the base, which is half D, which we've outlined in the previous simplified block order. And then we'll go through each of these specific moldings. So let's get started. Alright, so to begin with, I'm going to grab my larger carpenter square here, and I'm going to draw a base. And I'm also going to draw a line that extends up. This is going to be my graphic scale, and this is going to go all the way up to 7 inches because we're going to use this drawing later on, the upper half of it. Before you take that off, we're going to go over 4 inches, and this is going to be the center line of our column. So if we move this over slightly, we're going to create another line adjacent to the one we just created, and that is going to be for our graphic scale. And so we're going to put one tick mark here at the 3 inches, and then we're going to put another one at 1.5 inches. And so what we've just created is we've created our base. So we're going to go ahead and label this as base, and this is 1/2 D. Okay, now let's outline our column width. So if you remember, we're getting our 3-inch scale here. So if I was to put this on the center at the 6, I'm going to mark either side, and that is going to give me my center. I'm also going to mark the center line of this column. Which I'm doing with a longer line and then a shorter dash. So it looks something like that. And I'm also going to continue that down just a little ways below that baseline that we created. Here we go. Okay, the other thing we're going to do is we're going to block out the base of this column. So now that I've marked the overall thickness of my column, I'm going to do a little dash line going up, and I'm going to have it go up just 1.5 inches, a little bit past that. Because we're doing just a little bit above 1.5 inches, that is to accommodate where it's going to transition into the full column up there. Okay, so the other thing that we need to get started with in outlining here is we're going to create another graphic scale right adjacent to the one that we just created, but this one is only going to go up to 1/2 D, so 1.5 inches. Okay. And we are going to take that line across. So that's kind of the base of the column that we're going to be creating. Okay, so after we've done that, this little smaller graphic scale that we created, just like we did last time, we need to subdivide this into 18 parts. So to be able to do that, we're going to use our 1-inch scale, so the one that has a 1 on it, and this gives us 12 divisions, right, for 12 inches. So we're going to go just a little bit beyond that since it's 1.5 inches. So if you can see here, if I place that against that, you can see how I can get my 12 divisions, and then I move it over just a little bit more to get 6 more for 18 parts. So let's go ahead and create those. Make sure that's lined up there. So if we're using our 1-inch scale, it's every inch. I'm going to slide that over after I've got 12 and continue with 6 more. Okay, so I'm going to label that 18 parts. And I'm also going to say that this is P for parts. But what this really equals to, what P is 1/36 of D. All right. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to start here on the bottom. We're going to draw the plinth, but to do that we've got to do a couple of things. First off, we're going to create our graphic scale on the bottom for D, and then we're also going to create another little extension arm, which is 7P. So we've already got established what P is, and so we're going to draw that now. So if I go ahead and draw a graphic scale, this is going to mark out our column. I'm going to strike a line on both of these sides. Okay. So we are going to call this D, the overall, and then each of these is half D. So that should be 1.5 inches on either side, and then for an overall of 3 inches for D. Okay. So I'm going to create a little extension arm off of this on both sides so that we can figure out what 7P needs to be. To do that, we're going to use our 1-inch scale just as we did before, and I'm going to strike a little line here for our graphic scale. And to get 7P, what we're going to be doing is we're going to draw a little tick mark here if we're using our 1-inch scale at every inch until we get to the number 7. We're going to do the same thing on the opposite side. Let's strike a little line there. Let's mark out 7. There we go. And the one that is 6 and 7, I'm going to take that up to just above there, that base line. Okay, well, now that we've got that, I'm going to grab my smaller little triangle because we're getting into some fine detail territory. And what I need to do now is this plinth is essentially 6 tall. So I've already got over here on the side our 18 parts. So if I go up 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I can bring a line over. And just to make sure that I've got this correct, I'm going to put, because 6 is 1/2 inch, make sure my line is straight. Yep, it was a little crooked. And that can throw us off in the long run. Okay, so now that we've got that, I'm going to go ahead and, from that 7P here on the bottom, I'll go ahead and label that. Strike a vertical line there. That's going to be the far edge of our plinth block. We're going to do the same thing for the other side. And before I go up, I'm just going to dash in that. The other way of finding this would have been to do a 45-degree angle there to create a square. And then same for this little guy in there. Let's do the same thing. All right. Okay, from there we're going to strike another line across, and this is going to be our Taurus molding. And the Taurus molding here is 4 tall. So if we go up another 4 parts, 4P, that will give us that height. So I'm going to take my larger ruler here, square. Make sure we're straight. All right. And we've got that. So now that we've got that, we can either just use kind of this graphic scale that we've created here on the bottom, or go back to our 1 inch. And the center of this circle is going to be 2P in. So we're going to go ahead and draw a dashed line up from 2. And I'm going to do it on both sides. And the reason I do this is so that, and you could also do it the other direction, so you're creating a little cross or a square with 4 cubes in it. I'm going to put an X in that. And what that gives me then is the center point of the circle. So you could be more precise and place your compass with the center point here and strike and create half a circle. I am just going to do it roughly, eyeballing it. Okay. And we would do the same exact thing on the opposite side. So go into on either side. There we go. Now we've got our torus on both sides of our column base. Now with that, we're going to go ahead and create a couple of these other major lines. The first, what we're going to do is there's a couple of these that actually line up with our 18 parts that we've already created here. The first of which is the upper Taurus mold, and so we're going to create that horizontal line. And so to create that, that is 3 tall. So if we go down 3 markers there from the top, 1, 2, and 3. Strike that all the way through. Now we've got that torus. And then from there, we're going to go down another 2, and that is going to be one of our beads. And that bead is just, we're going to strike a line 2 down and then 1 more down for P. Let's go 2 down. Then we'll go 1 more down. Okay. Perfect. All right. So on a couple of these, they're a little bit hard to see. I'll bring this a little bit closer here. But in between, after the Taurus, we've got a little fillet mold. Then we have a Scotia. We've got a fillet, and then we've got 2 beads, a fillet, a Scotia, a fillet, a Taurus, a larger fillet, and then a conge. And so these smaller fillets, that's what we're going to create next. These small fillets are, especially at the scale that we're drawing this to, they're only 1/4 of P. So if I'm using my 1-inch scale here, and I'll bring this closer. All right. So with this 1-inch scale, you can see every, we'll start on this side, 1, 2, 3. But for every 1, we've got 4 subdivisions. So to get our 1/4 in there, that is how small that is going to be. So pretty teeny. So we're going to go ahead and mark that off here. So from the top of that first torus, going up from the top, bottom, we're going to go up 1/4. I'm just going to do this on both sides because it is so small, and then we'll strike a line across it. Okay, so we've got that, and then we're also going to do the same, that other line that we created. We're going to go down 1/4 of P as well. The other line that we created just above it, we are going to do another one that is 1/4. And then there in the middle of that, we're going to just subdivide that in half. So subdividing that one in half and then going up 1/4 P. And then going down from that other line that we just created, we're going to do another 1/4 P and go down from there. on both sides. Okay, so now let's strike those lines, and you'll see what I mean by how small they are. We've got one, got another one. This one's where we cut it in half. This is for the two bead moldings. Then we go another 1/4 P, and then just above our bottom Taurus we'll have that other 1/4 P. Okay. Alright, so if we're following this now, I'm going to just show this one for clarification purposes. If we go up for our plinth block, then we have our Taurus, and right where our Taurus does half a radius, that is where we're going to go vertical for that fillet. So right there, we're going to go vertical. I'm going to do that on both sides. Erase some of this for clarity's sake. And then to be able to do this next part, we're going to need to go in 3. So if I was to continue this line up, and I'll do it on both sides, because this is going to be our base that we're going to use for measuring. So if I was to go in 3, because from that line, that projection, we're going to go in 3P that is, and that is going to give us the edge of our bead molds. So if I do that on both sides, okay. So for those bead molds, we're going to do half a radius, and these are really small. Okay. Once I've got those half radiuses where they terminate, just as we did with this larger Taurus, where it does that half radius, that's where it goes vertical. That's going to be the same for those other smaller fillets on either side. So I'm going to go ahead and put those verticals in. Okay. So from there, now that we've got that, we're going to connect these two. So we're creating what is called a Scotia mold. And a Scotia molding, if I was to create a radius here for a circle, and that radius, a larger circle connects to a smaller one. That is how we create that Scotia molding. So we're going to go ahead and create that. It's kind of like a lazy C type shape. Okay. So I've created that on both sides there for that first one. Remember how at the beginning of this video we were talking about the difference between the Corinthian and the Ionic. The Ionic essentially only has 2 Taurus, and it's sandwiched, it has a singular Scotia molding sandwiched in between. For this one we've got the 2 Scotia moldings. that are sandwiched in between two fillets as well as two beads. Okay. To be able to determine the next scotia that is above that the two beads and that fillet, what we're going to do is we've got to start a little bit. We've kind of got to do some reverse engineering. But we've already got that spacing for the 3, and if I take that up from the edge where those two beads are, this is where that upper Taurus molding is going to go. So to create this, just as we've done in the past, if I was to grab my 45-degree angle here, create an X and then create a plus, I can go ahead and create that half a radius for that upper Taurus mold. I'll do the same thing on the opposite side. Okay. And then going down from there on either side, we're going to create that little vertical for that fillet. And that gives us our starting point for the top of the scotia. So just as we did before, it dips in and then comes out. Okay. So once we've created this, we need to create this top fillet little mold here. And so that is 1.5 P. So if I get back my 1-inch scale, I'm going to go up 1.5. On both sides. And then I'm going to strike that line across. Okay. So now the last part is, what we're going to do is we're going to create a solid line for our overall thickness, the diameter of the column. That goes up just a little bit, about 1 inch or so above. And we're now going to create a 1/4 of a circle based on the remaining distance there to create the conge mold. Once again, I'm just eyeballing this, and that is going to transition into our overall thickness for the column. So let's go ahead, and we missed a few things. Let's label this. That's the center line. We've got D. So the overall distance here, that is 5P. Going to that edge of the Taurus mold, that is 3P. And then we've also got this one down here, which was 2P. I'm going to erase some of these other small lines here for clarity's sake. Okay. And then over here on this other side, I'm going to create a little dimension stringer. Take some of these lines across. And we're just going to do the major ones. We're not going to do all of those quarter P ones because it will start to get really muddy. Okay. Put some tick marks on there. So this first one is going to be 6, and we go to 4, and I'll just put the P there for a reminder. 4. From there, we have, as you recall, our Scotia. So it's 1.5 for just the Scotia, but if we add those 2 fillets in there, we actually get 2, and it goes to 1, it goes to 2 again, then it goes to 3, and then it goes to 1.5, 1.5. All right, so with that, I'm just going to outline some of these major moldings so that they're a little bit more clearly visible. With my fine tip Sharpie marker. Do the same on this opposite side. Re-emphasize our base. And there we have it, our Corinthian base of our column.